I've realised why I'm having such a hard time because my glasses are somewhere. Yeah, I know you. Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, hello.
So today we're looking at stereo effects pedals. The merits of where they sound great, where you might struggle with them. So we have the Timeline staple that's been, we've used for ages, and you can hear us just set up a little dual delay. So a quarter note is going through one side, triplet's going through the other. That's how that works. And then we have the New Neighbor Immerse. So this is their new reverb pedal. It's just unreal. So this is the dry sound. New Neighbor.
We actually have to physically turn it off, otherwise it would go forever.
It will.
Okay, tell you what, it's got a pretty good core dry-through sound.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Because normally when you put that much reverb on, everything gets lost.
Yeah, so it has the dry through thing.
Really nice.
Yep. So when you turn the mix all the way down, you get. Take it out. Back in. It's really, really transparent. And then add effect level to taste. Now, so we have it set up in stereo. We're using the Super and the Mallard, okay? Two outputs, stereo reverb, stereo delay.
So G2 allows you to do this because you've got two outputs and loops 9 and 10 are stereo, right?
That's right,
okay.
That's right. It sounds really great, okay? Epic.
It does sound epic.
And it's like, I think when we were setting up and you were just having it fiddle around, I think you were kind of a bit surprised how...
Yeah, so when we were setting up, Dan was just making sure everything was plugged in, and I was playing just to check the levels and everything. And it's no good talking about it now because you can't hear it, but I played stuff that I would never normally play because the sort of inspiration factor of the stereo effects is such that it just leads you off into other places.
Yeah.
You know, if you were to have some altering... No, I'm not even going to go there. You can get lost in it.
Yeah, you can absolutely get lost in it.
Yeah.
So, like loads of effect that we've got there. So stereo delay, stereo reverb. Tap in a tempo. You can literally sit there for hours.
Yeah.
It is so much fun. Okay, so it's a great way to, if you can
lose 2 weeks. Literally, you could just sit there for days, kind of,
Lovely. So, it's great. And I have this conversation with a lot of guys. The issue that you get is when you're playing live.
Yeah, completely.
Okay?
Yeah.
So,
Dan's working up to saying it's completely brilliant. You could spend 50 years in your bedroom making ambient albums,
yes.
but yeah, hard to take in a band.
What happens is, we went and saw Andy Timmons last year. Actually, our very first ever.
Name drop horn.
So it was our very first ever That Pedal show
Yes,
with Andy,
indeed.
and he was playing at the basement,
Yeah,
and he had his stereo boogie rig, and he sounded just
it
unbelievable.
was amazing. It was completely
Unbelievable, because it was his gig. He could play as loud as he likes.
Yeah,
The sound guy has to, this is Andy's gig. He's going to sort him out. He's going to make him sound awesome. And if you have the luxury to do that, just brilliant.
yeah,
If you're doing a support slot, you've got 5 minutes to get on stage. The sound guy's going to throw one mic in front of you. I think there's a lot to be said for making sure that you've got awesome tone. You can get an awesome sound out of one amp and one speaker, one microphone.
Mm.
I think anything else is a luxury, and it's, if you can, brilliant. But anything else is luxury. Make sure that you can get that sound that you're after from one amp, one microphone to start with. Then expand. Yeah.
which presumably brings us on to where we're going, does it, or not yet?
Well, so the other side of things, especially with, I love 2 amp rigs. Not for the stereo thing, but for the different textures you can get from running 2 amplifiers. So we've been running these 2 amplifiers today, the Super and the Mallard, and my goodness, what an incredible sound.
Yeah.
The Super has just sort of blown me away. It sounds so great. Stereo for me, it's great if you can do it. The 2 amp rig can work really well if you're using them for tonal purposes, like a dual mono thing. Or what works really well is a wet dry rig.
Okay, look, just before we move on to that, there's a couple of questions that I know will get asked about stereo rigs.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you.
Ask away.
First question is going to be about loops, because people who like to use stereo effects sometimes like to, especially if they're using a lot of gain in the front of the amp, are going to want to run, let's say, their timeline as a stereo effects loop into 2 amps.
Yep.
How do you do that?
Okay. There's a really easy way to do it. Okay, and there's a more complicated way to do it. The simple way to do it is this. Let's say you've got 2 heads. You know, 2 exactly the same amplifiers, 2 heads, cabs.
Yeah, like Rabea, for example.
Like Rabea.
Yeah.
Okay, well, no, because Rabea doesn't use the 2 same amplifiers, does he? He uses 2 separate amplifiers, separate preamps. He uses, because one amp, they're voiced slightly differently, those amplifiers.
Oh yeah, but it's the same amp. But they're set differently.
But they're set differently. But so, yeah, Rabea's not a good example. Here's a good example for the more complicated way to do it.
All right, okay, right.
So,
right. So you've got, let's say you've got 2
Andy
two
Timmons.
amps.
Okay, Andy Timmons is a really good example. Okay, he has his main amplifier, right? So his left amplifier and his right amplifier, but the main amplifier on the left. He runs everything into the front end, okay, the preamp. The effect send from that amplifier goes out into his delay pedal. Yeah. The left return on the delay goes back to the effects return on the amplifier, and the right return on the delay pedal goes to the effects return on the stereo amplifier. Now what that means is he's only using 1 preamp.
Okay.
Okay. So all of his the channel, the clean channel, the dirty channel, it's only on 1 amplifier.
Huh. Okay.
And that is feeding the delay, which is then feeding the power section to 2 amplifiers,
Never knew that.
that is a really
So there's nothing plugged in the input on his second
nothing
amp.
plugged into the input of the second
Huh,
amp.
okay,
It's only
interesting.
only the power amp
Yeah.
is being used on the second amplifier.
Huh.
It's a great way to do it because you've got one preamp to worry about. You can dial in your sounds, but you're still getting that stereo image. Okay, that can work really well. Now, Rabea, he has 2 separate preamps.
Actually, I think Rabia's got to the point where he deserves
Does he? Absolutely,
deserves a name
Yeah.
drop.
definitely.
Yeah.
We're going to get him in.
Yeah.
When we look at gent, evil, goat screaming pedals, we're going to get him in because we can't do that stuff, and he's such a great dude that we'll get him in.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So anyway, the way that he runs it, he splits his signal before the preamp into the 2 amplifiers. Effects send from both amplifiers comes out into stereo inputs. Stereo outs back to the effects returns of the amplifier. But what that means is he has to set up both preamps,
Yeah.
for the clean channel and dirty channel, but he sets them up slightly differently.
Yeah, relevant for him because he has the same amp, but they're set in 2 different ways.
That's right.
So yeah.
The issue with that is that you have to isolate the second amplifier, you've got to make sure that there's a transformer split from one to the input, and then the same thing on the return.
Yeah.
So
So what he's using something like Humdinger, is he?
he's using exactly. So
Yeah. So you can't just have your 2 amps send into a delay pedal, return, because you're going to get all kinds of loop hum problems, are you?
probably.
Probably. Yeah. Okay.
The reality is,
Yeah.
if you set it up so that you have earth loops, in one venue it might be great. You get to the next venue and it'll hum like crazy.
Yeah.
To make it a rig that you can go into any venue with, you need to make sure that you're isolated. You need to make sure that from the guitar there's one path to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other amplifier is isolated, and you can't just remove the earth from the cable. It's got to go through audio transformers, safety reasons. So yeah, that's the other way to do it.
Okay, so that was a quick aside on loops there, because as you'll know, Dan tends to prefer to run everything in the front of the amp for 2 reasons. 1, you love the sound of it. 2, you're never using that much gain in the front of the amp anyway.
No, it's
So-
always set up for pedals. The reality is I like the way that the preamp warms up the digital pedals.
Yeah.
I love that. And, good enough for David G. Good enough for little old me.
And I'm going to re-ask a question because I interrupted Dan on the last video when he started to say, if you start to use loops and effect sends and all the rest of it, it introduces a whole load of problems. So are those the problems you were referring to?
They are the problems
Hum.
I'm referring to. The hum, the earth loops.
Good.
One of the other problems is, though, every effects loop is different. Okay, it's more than, in theory, it's just a split point between the preamp and the power amp. But you have valve-driven effects loops, they're trying to keep that. Because what has to happen is that signal, which is, in the amplifier itself, the signal between the preamp and the power amp is actually quite a high impedance signal.
Right.
Because it's only travelling that far.
Oh my God, we're going to get into
buffers.
buffers again.
Well, this is the thing. So if you just put a split between the preamp and the power amp, then you're running it through a 30-foot cable
Yeah.
to your true bypass delay pedal and back to another 30 foot back to your amplifier,
Yeah.
you're going to run into all sorts of trouble. There are loads of guys who really struggle with the sound, and once they put their delays and things in the loops, if they feel it compromises their tone. This is why. Lots of new amplifiers, they've worked really hard in the effects loop, but still, you're still taking that preamp signal, splitting it, sending it out to the front, then back to the amplifier. So, but another really fantastic way to do it, and to make use of having different amplifiers, is what we call a wet dry rig. All right. Now I love this. I love this. So, tremolo,
Yeah.
the warped vinyl vibrato chorus, the timeline, and the reverb. That's all going to go to my wet amplifier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the overdrives and compression is going to go to both amplifiers.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I do is I just use a humdinger, and that comes in, it splits, isolate it out to the dry amplifier, buff it out back to the pedals, boom. So I'll take 30 seconds, I'll set that up so we can have a... There you go. That's wet dry. So, okay, what's going on there is we are using the Super, because the Super has so much headroom and can handle a lot of input. We're using the Super to take care of the wet effects, which is the reverb, the delay, the vibrato and the tremolo. So at the moment, we've got the delay and the reverb on, and in this amplifier, you'll hear this. Thank you, you'll hear this. Lots of reverb, lots of delay, lots of reverb, lots of delay.
Yeah, and if you try and play anything sensible now. Sounds amazing.
It sounds amazing, but you know,
it's very wet.
It's very wet. If I turn off the wet amplifier and turn on the humdinger, which is now going to this amplifier, you get this.
What is that?
That's the Carpe Diem.
The Carpe Diem and the...
So, that's where the signal is split after the Carpe Diem.
Yeah. Because you've come out of loop...
So, the Carpe Diem's in loop 5.
Yeah.
I've come out of loop 6 into
Into
the
a humdinger.
The buffered output is coming back into the return of loop 6. The isolated output is going to the Marshall. So what happens now, we've heard the wet amp, we've heard the dry amp, now when you put them on together, now,
so you can actually use a much wetter sound than you would.
much wetter.
Yeah,
Here's the reason. The dry amplifier retains all of your pick attack. Nothing gets lost. Okay, if I turn up the wet amplifier. So, yeah,
Sounds totally ace.
it's just the best thing, isn't it? That's great. So that you can put loads of effect on the wet amplifier, but you always have the clarity coming through in the dry amplifier. So I mean, there is so much just the wet amplifiers. That's a lot on there. If I put even more delay on there, yeah. But wet dry. There's a number of reasons. Oh yes, you're a genius. So, in a live context, there's a number of reasons why this is really good. If you're on a touring band, right, you've got your sound guy, and you're doing loads of different venues, you have a wet-dry rig.
Yeah.
If you're on a venue that is really echoey and things, the sound guy turns the wet amp down in front of house.
Yeah.
If you're in a really dead room, the sound guy turns the wet rig up. So he's got a lot of control over how much effect is coming through the front of house, but you'll never lose the clarity because the dry amp is always there.
Similarly, if you don't have a sound man and you're off doing gigs and you
just control it yourself.
Can be bothered enough, are interested enough, have enough on-stage space, and the rest of your band allow it. Yeah, exactly. You just control it yourself.
So another really good example is
Hang on, don't change anything.
Isn't that great?
That is just...
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, another really great thing about the wet dry rig is you don't need stereo pedals to do it. You just do it with mono pedals.
Yeah,
okay, so
because we're not running anything stereo here, right?
No, you can do so analog delays and everything, mono analog delays, perfect.
Yeah.
So something like, this is a really good example, something like the warped vinyl here. So Joel, my mate from Chase Bliss Audio, legend, and he creates these amazing pedals. So if I have a look at this into the wet rig, okay, you get this sound. Full on, right? Full on. But if I put that in context with the dry amplifier,
what a sound! I mean, all right. So if you're going down the pub this Friday and playing Rolling Stone songs, chances are you're not gonna carry out a massive wet dry rig and have loads of wet sound. But you know what? Writing your own tunes, inspiration for songs. I mean,
it's unreal.
My songs would all end up like 28 minutes long.
And Prog was born.
Of course.
That's how.
Yeah, it's like a Sun Odge album. Sun O, you know.
So another really good thing is tremolo. So if we put the tremolo on with just...
If only we had a guitar that sounded ace with tremolo.
Let's try this. So tremolo, I'll turn the delay off, so just tremolo on reverb. I love this tremolo. Okay, it's beautiful, right? But Let's hear it now with the dry amplifier.
Oh, I see the dry amp wasn't even on.
No.
Oh my god! What a totally inspiring sound.
Amazing, isn't it? So what we've done...
You know what else is ace about a really wet amp?
Tell me.
You don't want to play loads of notes.
No.
It almost asks for melody rather than any kind of tricky business.
Definitely. And so you've got to be...
good for me and you.
Yeah, well, you've got to be disciplined
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that. But that's the thing, having the dry amplifier... This is one of the things about having the dry amplifier is that you can actually get away with more than with just everything totally wet.
Yeah.
Yeah? So... It's because no matter what I play, this amp is getting that attack.
Yeah, you don't lose any of the
Don't
front.
lose any.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah? So, it's a really great way to do it. The Super has got more headroom, so we're using that for the wet effects. The Marshall is half the wattage of that, has half the amount of headroom, so it will break up naturally a lot earlier on
Yeah.
than this. So, lots of guys out there now are realise that they need more than one amplifier.
Mm.
Yeah. So if you have more than one amplifier, you have a low wattage one and a high wattage one, the wet dry rig is just awesome.
You might assume that doubling up on your amps doubles up on your volume, makes it kind of unusable. Actually, where we are in the room today, it's not. I mean, that's sort of gig volume, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would say maybe for plenty of bands I've been in, that is way below gig volume.
Mm-hmm.
For decent sort of kind of gigs you do with decent monitors and all the rest of it, that's probably about gig volume, is it? Thereabouts.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, it's certainly not. It's not banging loud.
No.
Doesn't hurt the
not,
ears in here.
The
But it
sound
sounds
pressure level is not hurting the ears at all.
Sounds massive.
It does. It sounds absolutely huge.
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
very inspiring. So it's an alternative, shall we say, to the stereo rig.
Mm.
So you don't need specific stereo pedals and the two of the exactly same amplifiers to get the stereo thing. You can mix and match and use analog pedals. You just have to be able to split the signal and do it with something that's going to give you isolation to the dry amplifier.
Yeah, so if you didn't have a G2, for example, the way I used to do it was I'd go into my drive pedals, out of the drive pedal into the humdinger,
That's it.
and then the humdinger out into
So-
one amp,
Yeah.
and then the rest of the the other output from the humdinger
Into
through the
wet
rest of
effects.
the
Yep, so you don't... Exactly.
Yeah.
You just need to be able to split the signal. That's
split,
it.
isolate, and phase control.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Boom.
Hooray!
Yeah.
I have been listening. You see, that's the way that works.
Yeah, so there we go.
Awesome. So stereo or wet dry? What do we say, Dan?
For me, I find it totally more inspiring doing wet dry.
Yeah, you've got an easier life with wet dry for sure.
Yeah, you retain your front end pick attack. Sound guy has got more control over what's going on. I find the wet dry thing totally inspiring. Stereo can sound great if you want ping pong delays and stuff. There are guys who do it, and it can be
Yeah.
fantastic. But for me, totally wet dry. But you need to be able to get your sound out of one amp and one speaker get that sorted. But, you know,
Yeah. And
like,
if you were doing that, presumably you'd just take the wet amp and you'd make everything a bit less wet.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the way you do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
But yes, but for me, it's wet dry every day of the week. I love it.
Good.
Very good.
Have we covered everything?
I think so. Can you think of anything else?
No, I'm in a little bit of a daze at how good that sounded.
But it's awesome, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
it's totally inspiring.
Yeah,
Totally
yeah,
inspiring. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. And we will see you next week.
See you next time.